Hello and welcome to the Unlocking Behaviour Change Podcast, the show all about psychology and changing behaviour. My name is Jamie West and I am joined by Professor Emeritus Robert West. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Jamie. How's things?
I am very good. I'm excited. There's a big cricket final on tonight. My side, the Oval Invincibles, are vying to win the 100 for a third year in a row. So I'm very excited. And how are you?
Yeah, good. The 100 sounds like that would be a lot, but actually it's probably the shortest form of the game of cricket that we've got. So I'm sure those cricket aficionados will be thrilled to know about all that.
Well, the aficionados are mixed, as always, because it's a sort of a more user-friendly version of the game. But I wasn't sure that I was going to like it before it came on. I thought, is it going to be really gimmicky? But actually, I've loved it. It's fantastic. And it's brought the women's game, which I hadn't watched that much. Now I watch that, much more regularly. And the sides have a women's and a men's side. And you're like, and it kind of has this camaraderie and...
It's almost like a proper sport, really.
Almost. Right, okay, so this season we are looking at decision-making. We've gone all the way through the facet framework, and I thought what we'd do next would be to look at the kind of the background behind how we make decisions. What's the ground for how we make decisions? What is our basic way in which we interpret the world? So I want to talk about forming impressions. Forming impressions is very important because the impressions that we form have a massive impact on the decisions that we make, don't they, Robert?
Yes, they are our way into understanding the world that we live in and making judgments about it. And we'll cover both of these things that I'm just going to mention. One is forming impressions about things that we believe to be factually true or probably true, but, they're about information, and also forming impressions about value, about what is good and bad and right and wrong and so on. And those of you who've been following the podcast will be aware that, of course, fact and value are, or our perceptions of these, are two incredibly important features of decision-making.
So tell me a bit more about that, fact and value.
Well, when we form impressions about the world and make judgments, we can do it from our own experience. We can do it from things that we've been told. We can do it through inference, through thinking about things and using information to form new views on things and perceptions of things. And the two key dimensions for that are what we think is true or could be true, and what we like or don't like or think is good or bad. So, and they very often get sort of confused in people's minds. And that's one of the ways in which decisions can often go wrong, is that we kind of use what we want or what we like or what we think should be true to make a judgment about what we think is true. You see this obviously most evidently at the moment in political decision-making, where if you've got a whole swathe of people in a particular country who feel very much let down by a political system as it's currently operating, then they look around for alternatives. An alternative is presented to them, and they desperately need or want that alternative to meet their needs and to do better for them than the old traditional approaches. So they believe any old nonsense that those people, those usually right-wing populists, present because they desperately want to. And so, but that's just one example. Even in science, we see this a lot, where, for example, I formulate a theory or a hypothesis about something, and I do an experiment that tests the hypothesis, and I'm invested in it. And one of the things that as a scientist or as a human being, we should always try and do for our own sake as well as everyone else's, is to always be reflective when we are forming these sorts of impressions, that we're not letting our values and our wishes interfere with our judgment about what's true or not.
Something that I've heard you say before is that we believe what we want to believe. So that's quite an interesting idea. And our perceptions, I think, are genuinely shaped by what we believe and expect to see, or if not expect to see, want to see. And I sometimes think about this when I'm watching tennis, when a ball is out and the player believes it is in. And actually, sometimes it might be quite a bit further out than what they think. But what their eyes probably did, I don't know how it works perceptually, but I'm sure their eyes probably did see it go in. What they saw was the ball going in.
What's really, we can get into a little bit into the weeds of the way our perceptual system operates, but in a very important sense, you're absolutely right. It's not necessarily that our eyes per se, the retina, is seeing the ball in or out or whatever. The image on the retina is what it is, but that's not what perception is. Perception involves essentially two key processes: a bottom-up process in which you're getting information from your sense organs, and a top-down process, which is what our expectations and our desires and our values and our view of the world, the way we believe the world operates, consciously or not consciously, those all come together to create this perception. And it's not just the belief, it's actually the perception. So when let's say you're in the jungle and suddenly your eyes light upon some squiggly thing down on the ground, what you see is a snake. And even though it may be a twig, but for a moment there, and possibly for more than a moment, it's not just that you see something and you think it might be a snake. You see a snake.
I've noticed this a lot with my own perceptions as I walk around. Say when I'm walking at night, I've noticed that I'm much more liable to see somebody approaching from a distance as a threat, as I may have experienced when I was younger, for example. And then I get close and it's like a little old lady or something, but like, whoa, my perception was quite a long way off there from reality. But of course, those are unconscious processes that are a little bit, they're meant to keep you safe. So it's easier for you. I discovered a really interesting, I suppose it's a bias, but I think it's called the auditory looming bias.
No.
This is so interesting. So I've noticed this so many times and I didn't think to look it up, but I was walking on the street and I heard this motorbike coming. I thought, my God, this is so close to me. Like that motorbike, whoa, it felt, and then I looked and it was, several meters away. And our brain perceives approaching sounds as being closer and sort of louder than they are to protect us.
I did not know about that. That's I've learned something about psychology, which happens every now and then. Yeah.
But I've experienced, because I'm quite sensitive to sound, being a musician. But it's like, oh, that makes so much sense as to why. So I stayed in a while at a flat in next to a railway, and the trains would charge through at night, and I'd wake up in the night thinking that the train was literally coming through the building. And it would have been around this kind of approaching, because my brain is telling me that's how close it is.
And that is a non-conscious process, which arises from the way your particular brain is wired. And obviously what's interesting here is that there will be individual differences and to some degree predictable ones in relation to, one of the big differences that exists across humans is the extent to which we see things as threats or not. And if one is, for whatever reason, it might be, the genetics involved. It might be early experiences. Could be all sorts of things or some combination. It's quite a stable trait, the extent to which you see the world as threatening, or you're on the lookout for, your brain is on the lookout for potential threats, versus you're sort of on the other extreme. As we probably all know people like this who sort of wander through the world blithely, being, dodging, not even dodging bullets, with bullets whistling past their head, and they don't even really notice that there's anything happening.
Inspector Clouseau.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Obliviousness.
Yeah.
So when it comes to how we process information, I think we have expectations about the world, don't we? And we tend to notice things that violate those expectations.
Yes. So one of the key ways in which humans have managed to survive over the tens of thousands of years that we have, and our ancestors did, is to be particularly sensitive to change, and to be particularly sensitive to environmental stimuli that go against what we're expecting. But they have to, in order to do that, they have to get over some kind of threshold for us to believe or perceive them as different, because we have, and we've talked about this before, this thing called confirmation bias, where our top-down processing tends to lead us to perceive things that we expect to see. But of course, if we only ever did that, we'd never acquire any information at all. But we do notice change, and when our expectations are violated, then that causes our brains to sort of sit up and take notice, and it draws our awareness and our attention to focus on that thing, and then a whole bunch of evaluative mechanisms go on. Is this a threat? Is it an opportunity? Is friend or foe? And so on. So, I think, a key thing that we would like to get across now, perhaps one of the first key things, is this idea that violation of expectations is a key driver of our evaluative processes.
So when something happens that we didn't expect, it gets our attention, and then we're focused potentially on, we may start a whole load of processes to why this is happening. We may want to explain it to each other. We may talk to other people and go, this really strange thing happened.
But even before we do that, we decide whether we think it's good or bad. This whole value judgment that we make is so deeply, deeply ingrained into pretty much every part of our cognitive processing, our thought and perceptual processing. There's a lovely experiment done by over many years ago by a psychologist called Zayonk. And the title of the paper, I think, was something like Feeling Needs No Inferences. Essentially, the study was this. It was a very simple idea, and students could do this as a undergraduate project because it's very straightforward and it does work. You present your participants with photographs of faces, okay, one at a time, and their job is to do two things. One is to say how much they like or dislike the face, how attractive they think it is. And the other is to say whether they've seen it before in this list, okay? And what they found, Zayonk and his colleagues, was that over time, obviously, as you start to put faces in that people have seen before, they would rate them as more attractive than they had before. So there is this familiarity preference bias, even if they didn't recognize that they'd seen them before. So there was this unconscious process going on, familiarity process in the judgment that was lying outside conscious awareness of the recognition. And that, I think, it's a very, in a way, it's a sort of slightly trivial experiment, but it does show something very profound, which is that our judgments, our value judgments and our preferences are going alongside and often even preceding our cognitive judgments about the, things like whether we've seen it before or what we think is going on.
This comes up sometimes when I'm studying art and storytelling and all different kinds of artistic experiences, where sometimes you'll have a class where you'll talk about a number of stories that you like. You say, well, I like this story. I like To Kill a Mockingbird, and I like A Streetcar Named Desire, and I like Blood. And then there's often these connections between them that are unconscious that you have, that actually I seem to like a character who is like this. And there's lots of, or sometimes with buildings, I sometimes find that I really like classical buildings, neoclassical buildings. And I'd be like, oh, actually, that's building over there is really similar to this building over here. And it's very much like, oh, I just like this kind of thing.
Yeah. And even when you don't consciously recognize that you're drawing on a familiarity, as I say, that liking process, that evaluation, deep fundamental evaluation process is going on and taking place. And you can imagine how it would have sort of an adaptive advantage from an evolutionary point of view. But it's also very much worth being conscious of, aware that this can happen. I'm afraid that, unscrupulous marketeers and advertisers and politicians and so on use this process quite a bit to create liking for their propositions themselves, their products, and so on, by virtue of providing often a sort of subliminal or subconscious link to things with which we're familiar.
I mean, that's so much of what advertising is, probably has to be to some extent, because you've got to be playing on deeper emotions. So a lot of times adverts for alcohol will center around belonging and fun and not being left out. They don't have many adverts of people, drinking alone.
Can you imagine? Actually,
sad after having lost their job.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's interesting, because you think there's certain kinds of things that if you were to advertise them on the basis of what they actually are, then you're in for a tough job. Perfume, I always feel, is another one. The reason why perfume adverts are all about identity and creating a sense of a lifestyle, which has, of course, got absolutely nothing to do with smell. Arguably, you're not going to convince me. If you listeners, Jamie has a skeptical view on his face, and I'm not having it. Identity of that kind has nothing to do with smell.
I don't know if it's all about what meaning that we give it, isn't it? So it's the meanings that we give things, and so if you're used to smelling this kind of, we associate smells with lots of different things, don't we?
Well, that's a whole other thing. I grant you. I certainly, and I'm not saying smell generally. I mean,
I'm sorry, it's a whole other thing. We're still on the topic of smell.
It's a bit of another thing. Obviously, smells. There is a whole other thing in relation to the absolutely critical importance of smell in our values and judgments, and there's a sort of direct connection to things in the brain, including familiarity, for example. So yes, but I think what I'm referring to here in this specific instance is perfume smells, and what I don't want to labor the point, but the challenge for a marketeer to say this smell, which is just a sweet smell of something which, is probably quite nice, with a lifestyle, or with, rebellion, or with conformity, or with being rich or whatever. I mean, they do it very successfully.
I think I would agree with that. I think that's they've got to pair it with something, because smell, you can't there's no way you can experience a smell either through a
TV.
Through a TV. Not yet.
Not yet. Of course, in Futurama, we have smell-o-vision, but that's a whole other thing.
So I want to talk a bit more about expectations and how they lead us to certain emotions, for example. So I'm thinking a little bit about how we can set a baseline, say for someone's salary. If someone says that here's a job and you were expecting somehow, maybe your recruiter said to you it's going to be 40K. And then when you actually go to get the job, they're like, actually it's 37K. You're going to feel pretty disappointed. Whereas if the recruiter said it was 35K and then you go there and like, actually, so the starting salary is 37, you're going to feel pretty good. It's the same number. But how you relate to that is completely different depending on what you've been led to expect.
Absolutely. And the role of expectation in value judgment in that respect is very important. And this is a good point to bring in the very powerful and pervasive concept in psychology called adaptation level. Adaptation level is there in our perceptual system, it's there in our thoughts, it's there in our value judgments and so on. And so at the level that you are talking about, then it is about the way that we set our neutral point. Where is the point at which we're going, okay, that's fine. It is what it is. I'm not feeling good about it. I'm not feeling bad. It just is what it is. Above which your novelty circuits kick in a little bit in a positive way, and you go, oh, right, well, that was better than I thought it was going to be. That's great. Versus in a negative way, still the novelty circuits are kicking in, but now they're kicking in and saying, oh, well, that's a bit disappointing. And as individuals, of course, we vary in the extent to which, being kind of aware of this process, we set our adaptation levels. So I know that I tend to set mine quite low because I don't like being disappointed. And so I get, more often than not, I am pleasantly surprised by outcomes of things. Whereas other people, I know, will be optimistic and set their adaptation levels high and are more likely then to be disappointed. So it all depends in your own understanding of your psyche, where you set your adaptation level as to what, how happy you're going to be in life. If you're someone who, like myself, I would say I am more punishment sensitive than reward sensitive, then it pays for me to set my adaptation fairly low so that I don't get punished too often in that way. Other people are more reward sensitive than punishment sensitive. So it's not such a big deal if they're disappointed, but it's great, when they're rewarded. So adaptation levels and experiences versus expectations are one of the most fundamental things that one can say about human values and judgments.
And that kind of thing must be playing out all the time. Everywhere you go, you've got expectations, you have adaptation levels. And of course, they go up, don't they? We habituate to things, often things that are good, we habituate. And then I sometimes think whenever you read psychology literature, they always talk about the importance of gratitude and things like that. And I imagine that is a counter to partially the society we live in, which is always telling us through adverts and things that we need and want more and all of that. So we start to feel we're not enough or things like that, and we don't have enough. And then it's quite easy to forget some things that we have that were apps, like how we're talking now. We're very used to this now. We didn't I don't know if you sat down and thought, whoa, I can talk to Jamie across, miles, and it's like going via a satellite, and then we can see clear, high definition images of each other. Now this is a norm. We just go, right, yeah, okay, got to do that meeting, and that's how we tend to relate to it.
It is, and and you're absolutely right that in some philosophies and self-help guides and so on, you will see a very, very conscious, deliberate process being advised to counter that, to say, look at the sunset, look at this beautiful stuff, look at all what we've got. It's amazing. And to be appreciative of things that one's otherwise just got used to and feels nothing about because they're sitting right on your adaptation level. And you can, to a degree, can't you? I mean, when you do think about it, you go, yeah, that is amazing. It's not quite as amazing as when you first heard it. I remember when I heard Paranoid by Black Sabbath for the first time, I was absolutely, back in around 1970, I was bowled over. I was absolutely knocked out by it because I'd never heard anything like it before. It was astonishing. And I was just at a conference earlier this week in which I was in a band that was playing Paranoid by Black Sabbath. For the first time in my life, I played it and did the guitar solo. And it was great, but it wasn't that experience. So this habituation is incredibly important in setting our adaptation levels. And just by way of balance, as it were, a lot of what we experience when we see things, when we encounter things repeatedly, is this habituation, by which I mean getting used to something and it goes towards one's adaptation level. But we also, for some stimuli, experience sensitization, which is, instead of it going towards our adaptation level, it actually goes away from it. We actually end up being more emotionally charged by it or affected by it than we were before. I'm sure there is a big area of research to try and figure out when you get these two things. I have some views on it, but I don't know, what the truth is. But an example, which you will remember, because you used to do it, is someone tapping their fingers on a table, which initially is okay. It starts to get a bit annoying, then gets more annoying as time goes on.
That wasn't me. That was you.
Was it me?
I used to do that. That was you who used to do that to test out this sensitization thing.
Well, there we go. But, so certain things get worse. And in the case of certain, just getting onto, one of the areas that I actually know something about, which is addiction, stimulant drugs like cocaine and amphetamine, rather than being addictive because of habituation, because your body's getting used to them, they're addictive because your body actually your brain sensitizes to the rewarding effects of those drugs, interestingly.
And if memory serves, we sensitize, or the brain sensitizes to the reward, which means do it again, but it doesn't necessarily sensitize to the pleasure.
Exactly.
The pleasure and the reward. We don't have time to go into all of that now, but it's quite interesting.
It's a fascinating thing, is you find yourself being more rewarded by something and therefore feeling more of an urge to do it, while at the same time, the pleasure that you get from it is getting less. It makes no sense, from a sort of common sense point of view. It's all there in the chemistry of your midbrain.
Yeah, that is a great thing to learn, and quite, it's applicable, I think, very much to our phones and things like that. Okay, well, we're about out of time for this podcast. I feel like there's a lot more to say on forming impressions, so I suspect we'll be coming back to that in the next episode. But it remains for me to say thank you very much, Robert. That was very interesting.
Thank you, Jamie. I also found it interesting.
That's good. And I hope you at home or wherever you are listening to this podcast found it interesting. And we look forward to joining you next time on the Unlocking Behaviour Change podcast.